Joining us now, though, for all of today's breaking news, former Republican Congressman from Florida, now an independent, David Jolly, former senior FBI official Chuck Rosenberg, Frank Figliuzzi, former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI, and former chief spokesman for the Department of Justice, Matt Miller. I've been riveted by two of you. I'm always riveted by all of you, but Matt Miller's Twitter feed and David Jolly's appearance on the 11 have kept me up all night. Let me start with you, David, and then I'll go to Matt.
Yeah, sure. Look, on the question of reaction to the president's comments yesterday, I made the comment that I think his comments in the Oval Office alone, you even forget about a Mueller report, were an impeachable moment. The president suggesting he'd be willing to engage in criminal activity going into the next election. And I think if it resonated with a constituency out there, it were those who are begging for urgency of leadership. We debate often at this table strategy, right? Should Nancy Pelosi move towards impeachment or not? Those are questions of strategy. But there's a constituency across the country, and I count myself in it, that's begging for urgency. And if we revisit the lay of the land, what we were reminded of yesterday is we have a president hell-bent on breaking the law anytime it's a benefit to him, surrounded by a White House staff that is like the White House version of Little Rascals, if you will, although a little less endearing. A cabinet...
I'm missing their mouthpiece now.
Right, that's right. A cabinet that seems to approach their jobs as though it's a pyramid scheme where they get to plunder the Treasury and the rule of law. And so the nation turns to the only remaining place, which is the Congress, and turns with heartache and urgency and begging for leadership. And Nancy Pelosi did not ask for this moment. And Democrats who say don't criticize the speaker, I fully understand that. She didn't ask for this moment. It is not her actions that caused this moment. It is the malfeasance of Donald Trump. But Nancy Pelosi is the highest-ranking constitutional officer outside of the White House. Where else can we turn? We've lived through the last 3 years as though it's this pop culture moment, this social media phenom in Donald Trump. But the answers don't lie in pop culture. They don't lie in the commentators around this table or the late-night comedians. The answers to a constitutional crisis lie in constitutional officers like the Speaker of the House. It's why I think people are begging for her to do more.
You and I were talking before we came on the air that as former Republicans, people formerly associated with the Republican Party, Democrats are particularly prickly when they hear us calling on people like Nancy Pelosi to do more. And I always say, it's not because it's her fault. It's not to be critical of her. It's because she's all we've got.
She's all we've got. And understand, many of us have called out Republicans in the last 2 years, and if you want us to do it every day going forward, okay, I'll agree with that. Republicans aren't going to do anything. Kevin McCarthy today was a scurrilous sycophant who lied to the American people. And he did so in scripted talking points to insulate the president from accountability that he should suffer from his comments in the Oval Office yesterday. If we cannot look to Republicans, who do we look to?
Democrats.
Democrats.
Yeah. Matt Miller, I want you to pick up that thread and also weigh in on the breaking news this hour, poetic justice that it broke in my hour, I guess, that Sarah Huckabee Sanders is moving on to greener pastures.
Well, let me start with that piece. I don't want to sound rude or kind of flip, but good riddance is the only thing I can think of. I mean, I used to speak on behalf of the government, on behalf of the United States. Used to do a similar job speaking on behalf of the United States, and it is kind of a solemn job. You take that job seriously, and the most important thing in those jobs is to never lie to the American public. And there, I remember there were a few times where I got things wrong and found out later that I had said something that wasn't accurate, and I made sure I went back and corrected it and cleaned it up. And she just repeatedly used her job to lie over and over again to the American people. And I hope that she's not able to escape this White House and move on to whatever she does in life without kind of the shame and stigma that is associated with her following her for the rest of her career.
And you and I both stood behind podiums and spoke on behalf of the U.S. government. She did that, and one of the enduring pieces of her legacy will forever be chronicled in the Mueller report, where she stood behind that podium, smeared the reputation and professional legacy of Jim Comey, former FBI director. I just asked his former deputy, Andy McCabe, about it, but I wonder your thoughts. That it's not an opinion of critics of Donald Trump that she was a liar and used the White House podium, a place from which wars are started and ended, to lie and smear and assassinate the character of good men and women. It's in the Mueller report. It was information that she confessed to in her own interview with Mueller's investigators. How's that for a resume builder, Matt?
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be great. I don't know but she'll probably walk out with a Fox contract. We'll see. It might be a great resume builder in the conservative side of the world. Look, I think that's a great episode to mention because it shows how brazen a liar she is. That was obviously not true to anyone who knows anything about the FBI, probably even people who don't know anything about the FBI, the moment those words came out of her mouth. So then she gets asked about it in her interview with the FBI, when if she lies, she's going to, potentially go to jail. So she has to tell the truth, and she does tell the truth and admits that she was lying. The Mueller report comes out. She gets asked about it again by reporters saying, why don't you clean this up and admit that you lied to us? And then she goes back and lies again and comes up with some other story to say that, well, what the Mueller report says is not really what I told them. So she had this initial lie, told the truth when she had to, but then when she was caught in front of the American public, just came up with another lie to try to explain her story. It was kind of a disgraceful episode that I think represented a disgraceful tenure quite well.
Matt Miller, you've been on fire on Twitter. Let me get your thoughts on the news of the day. Donald Trump saying he would absolutely listen, to a foreign government offering dirt or oppo on an opponent.
Look, I think those comments were unpatriotic. Obviously, they invite illegality. But at the bottom line, the real problem with them, or the problem with everything else with him, they come from a place where that just inside him, it's just not centered in morality or ethics in any way. His only filter for anything is not what's right, not what is the right thing or the wrong thing to do, not what's right for the country, but what's the right thing for me? What's the best thing for me? And I think, to pick up on what David Jolly says, you see, and what you were saying, I do think it's fair for people to criticize Nancy Pelosi. She's, she can take it. She has an important job. But I do think I see people now kind of, imbuing impeachment with this sort of magical powers that if we just somehow, if one house impeaches the president, everything will be okay. He'll be magically removed from office, or even if he's not removed from office, it will stop him from behaving this way. It's kind of the same way I think a lot of people looked at Bob Mueller and thought that Bob Mueller was going to be the person that would fix everything that is so obviously wrong with what's happening in the White House right now. And I just don't know that's the case. There are, I think, very good reasons to impeach the president. I think there ought to be some sanction for his behavior. But I do worry that we're kind of, putting this turning impeachment into this pipe dream that can't deliver what we really would hope it might.
Chuck Rosenberg and Frank Figliuzzi, two former senior FBI officials, want to get both of your thoughts. Let me start with you, Chuck Rosenberg, on Donald Trump saying Christopher Wray is wrong to say that a campaign that has offered dirt from an American adversary should not call the FBI.
Yeah, it's hard to know if the president is being, provocative or obtuse or obstinate or more likely defensive. Chris Wray is not wrong. This is a fundamentally easy question, Nicole. The law prohibits taking anything of value from, as a contribution from a foreign government. So whether or not it's a crime, let's put that aside for a minute. There may be reasons why it is a crime. There may be reasons why it's not a crime, but it is fundamentally wrong. And that's what Director Wray was saying. He said it a month ago. He couldn't have been more clear. He was 100% right. Frankly, I don't think there's a reason for him to say it again. The contrast is stark. And anybody who, really, frankly, anybody living on this planet, breathing the same air that we're breathing, knows that the director is right and the president's wrong.
Chuck, though, a former FBI official described the men and women of the FBI and Chris Wray as their leader as existing on an island. You've got an Attorney General Barr, someone who accuses the government of spying on the Trump campaign and is now rummaging around in the intelligence agencies and also investigating the law enforcement agencies. You've got a president who says nobody does that. All of Congress gets dirt from foreign governments, and I'm going to do it too. I mean, I hear you, but what is the practical implication of the person who sits atop the chain of command saying, I'm not going to follow the laws?
Yeah, I worry about the long-term damage, Nicole, but sometimes you have to live on an island. Sometimes that middle spot is a lonely place. But look, even if the men and women are disgusted, as I imagine they are, men and women of the FBI are disgusted at the words of the president and the deeds of the president, they have to occupy that middle place. They have to continue to do their work without fear or favor. They can't become partisans. They can't comment on every idiotic thing that the president says. And so, maybe they do live on an island. Maybe that's an apt analogy, but sometimes that's where you need to be.
Frank Figliuzzi, let me get your thoughts on all of the news of the day, and let me add one for you. Gates and Flynn have now been subpoenaed to the House Intel Committee. As I asked former Director McCabe, what do they know? He was a little cagey, but they are cooperating witnesses for the federal government. What kind of granular understanding could they offer the Congress? And if their testimony is public, what kind of public education job could they do about those contacts with Russia?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that the House Intel Committee is pushing this aggressively. They should be, and quite frankly, they should have started this long ago. I think, look, Flynn had very close proximity, within earshot, if not actually in the room and participating in conversations with regard to Russia, the campaign. And remember, post-campaign in the White House, he knows the score with regard to the relationships with Russia, who's hiding conversations with Russia. I think Gates similarly can give us a lot more information with regard to Manafort's role and maybe connect some dots up even to the Oval Office and the president's knowledge of assistance being offered and or accepted with Russia. So I'm eager to see the results of that, and I think it's good. It's disturbing that Flynn, of course, has fired his counsel and gotten essentially a Fox spokesperson as a lawyer who just has disdain for the FBI and the law, and I think that's going to actually bite him when ultimately he's sentenced, but we'll stay tuned for that. With regard to the president's comments yesterday, I have to tell you, I've heard the president say, as you have, very disturbing things over recent time. We've heard him say he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it. We've heard him brag about sexually assaulting women. We've heard him say under his watch the CIA would never be allowed to recruit the half-brother of Kim Jong-un. But what he said yesterday, for me as a counterintelligence professional, put me over the line in favor of impeachment. And I know, and I agree with Matt, that we can't place some magical powers in the concept of impeachment. But sometimes you don't do the right thing because it's the winning thing. Right. You do the right thing because it's the only thing left to do. And right now, it's the only thing left to do as a matter of principle to call out this president and say, you cannot thumb your nose at the law and the Constitution and create a national security threat in your very presence.
Let me follow up with you on one of those. I gave you a poo-poo platter of breaking news to bite on, but let me follow up where you ended. I asked former Director McCabe if the kind of things that Donald Trump said in the Oval Office yesterday were the kinds of things that he had said that led Andy McCabe to open up that full field investigation into Donald Trump in the spring of his first year as president. He said absolutely. Was that your sense all along? And is this just a public-facing outburst from the president who has no filter? And the second part of that question would be, is this evidence for the president's lawyer's decision to never, ever, 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 they used to say to me, over my dead body will Trump sit down with Mueller? I mean, is this why?
Yeah, so a two-pronged question. Absolutely, I think, and one of my initial reactions when I first heard the ABC piece was, this is a glimpse of exactly what that was predicating and helping to predicate the FBI's original Russian counterintelligence investigation. And remember, I've said for a long time that we only saw the tip of the iceberg, the public-facing part. I still firmly believe there was classified intel that went into this predication that was even more disturbing and caused people like Pete Strzok and McCabe to say things were horrific, the worst possible things you could imagine is what we were concerned about. So we're getting a glimpse of that. And yes, with regard to why they could never put the president in front of Mueller and the team, look what happens when you put him in front of a camera. He's going to be recorded for posterity. He's going to say things that will be publicly disseminated. And what does he say? Yeah, I don't agree with the law, the FBI director, and I do it again.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.